evening, everybody. Coming off of my last video, which was a rant about Etsy, I would like to do something that, even if it's still emotionally charged, is a little bit more about positive vibes and good feelings. Um, I just kind of wanted to talk about something that happened to me, not last semester, but the semester beforehand, when I had a very much this is college, not high school moments, is what I like to call them, where my professor pulled me aside, and at first it seemed pretty easy. Uh, he just asked if everything was okay. Uh, I had never had a teacher directly ask me if I was okay before. Uh, just unless it was actually a physical thing where it's I'm coughing my lungs out, or I'm looking pale, because I do have some medical issues that can cause me to pass out. So you know I have to tell my teachers that sometimes, and so they have to keep an eye out for it. So it's like this was strangely out of the ordinary for me to have a professor just be like, hey, you look really stressed, you look, I've noticed you're not as active in class as much as you, or I guess as little as you normally do, because, and just not seeming there, which for this professor to notice that, I mean, it's the smallest class I've had, but also this professor to actually pay attention to my behavior problems, or not problems, but patterns, enough to notice when things went awry, because at the time I was stressed and I wasn't okay. Um, and so I just try to briefly explain to him, it's like, hey, I'm going through some stuff, I'm really stressed out with my other classes, and at the time I didn't have a job, so I was struggling on how I was going to make the couple next school payments, and just how I was just going to get by. And he kind of poked and prodded just to find more specific reasons, because everybody kind of says that, everybody's like, oh, I'm just a little stressed, I'm just a little not great, I guess. And so he asked if there was a problem I was having in a specific class, or if there was just something he could do to help. And I pretty much said that I was having a hard time in my programming classes. I just, between hard time keeping focus on the really easy stuff and then struggling on the really hard stuff, I was having a hard time. And at that moment in that current week, because I was been having so much fun and exploring things in this class that was not even related to my major, I was questioning if I was in the right major. But there's a lot of concerns with that. I have an internship with an indie game company that, it's like, it was a theater class. So if I got out of my programming and went into theater, would I lose my internship? And if I stayed in theater and I kept taking design classes and focused on something like that that's more artistic, that admittedly, I obviously I like art. So would that be okay? Would I just have to switch from being essentially the internal artist that's struggling to learn programming? Would I just be an artist? Would I just be a designer for them? But even how to bring that up to them, because at the time I was having a hard time with my projects with them, and taking a long time to turn those in. So I was worried, and I was like, hey, I'm not sure what really makes me happy at that point, because I've never been a person to want to be in a job that's just a job that doesn't help benefit you at all. other than getting paid or, getting like insurance and stuff. You're just doing your 9 to 5 and going home. That was just something I never wanted to do. So, not that there's nothing wrong with that. I know, like, it's just, I've seen it with my family, and while I've seen it with members of my family that have hobbies and have a life outside of work, and it works really well, I've also seen people who just get a job that pays well, then you're stuck with bills, and you're stuck with a job that sure pays the bills, but does nothing else for you, and, doesn't make you happy. And because you have no hobbies or friends outside of work, everything is about work, which you don't like. And so, for me, I wanted to make either, like, one of my direct hobbies or one of my secondary hobbies, I guess you could call it, into a job. Just because it makes sense. Obviously, like, I don't want my whole life to turn into just work, unless it's work that I'm going to like, and then at the same time, don't want to lose my hobbies into turning into the work and the 9 to 5 and losing its charm. But, I just didn't want, I guess, a boring life. And so he asked me, and kind of more directly asked me, not what do I want to do for a job. If getting a job that just pays well, or getting a job that is just a part of my hobbies, that's easy to get. As hard as it may seem for things like gaming or something, when you're just focused on just getting the job, it's pretty easy. Because, I could just take programming classes and, go get an internship at a much bigger company and just work my 9 to 5. And I would just have to deal with that being my job and that relating to my hobbies, and that's about it. But he wanted me to first answer, what do I want to do with my life? And not in what job you want, just straight up, direct. If I was to die, what would my biggest regret be? Like, what would I feel like I did not have enough time to accomplish? And I cried. It was kind of embarrassing, and I had some of my classmates still in the room, because this was obviously after the class, and, and they were all like, hey, everything good? And my professor pretty much was like, she's going through an awakening. And I was like, I have no idea what that means. But he asked me again, was like, what would I want to do with my life? And so I told him, my biggest regret would be to leave this world without telling any of my stories. Whether it's high fantasy, just classic adventure, hero meets up with other heroes in a tavern and goes on an adventure, or some of my more personal stories of, like, my interpretations of my life and things like that. Just, I wouldn't want to leave without being able to tell my stories, one form or another, in art, in, like, writing, in video making, in video games, just whatever. I want to be able to tell my stories. So he said, well, that is your option then. Instead of looking towards what degree would get me the job, or what classes would look good on a resume, what would help me learn how to explain my stories? What would teach me how to express myself either in the most direct or sometimes indirect way? And just, if creation is truly my goal in life, just to find classes that don't necessarily teach you how to create, but instead teach you how to refine what you create. And as silly as it may seem, it kind of just clicked. I had been taking a couple of drawing classes as my elective art classes before, and I always had a problem with them. And those words of, don't take a class that teaches you how to create, teaches you how to refine it, so that, a lot of those early classes, they're just teaching you how to draw what's directly in front of you. They're not teaching you how to develop your own concepts quite yet, and how to show those concepts. And I didn't hit the button. But as weird as it seems, I when it comes to like more direct things like the art, I don't need to learn how to draw a circle again. I don't need to learn how to shade a circle again. But things like different compositions and colors and things like that, the higher level stuff is not even necessarily what I need, but would be practice. And his class, which was a theater design class, focusing on how do moving parts work together, and what all these tiny little ideas mean when they're working together and when they're intertwined, and you get more than just the one perspective. It made sense. And, I told him that. I'm like, thanks, that makes a whole lot of sense. And he's like, see, what I meant by this is your awakening is that there's plenty of people in this world who know how to draw. There's plenty of people in this world who know how to set up a theater. There's plenty of people who know how to sew. There's plenty of people who know how to program, how to just get the job done. But when it comes to more abstract concepts, like actually designing, coming up with how to explain how to use those tools and things like that, that's a creative person's job. That's what people like me and him and a handful of those students in that class were meant for, was to not just do what we can, but to see what we cannot do, and to explore, and to see just how far we can push things, and to explain things that can't be explained. And I know it sounds like really deep and philosophical, but it kind of is. When I think of what I meant when I say I want to tell my stories, it's sure I can learn programming and learn to make games, which is something I still would prefer and like to do. And I know how to draw, but the fact that I can stare at a blank canvas and see an image that expresses an emotion, even if I can't do it at the time, or my tablet's broken and I can't express what I really want to. The fact that I can even come up with those ideas, knowing the meaning behind not just blue or red or green, but what do the different shades mean? What do the feeling gives off when they're combined with others? It's one of those weird things that you just kind of have to feel. And for a lot of people, they feel those things without being able to explain those things, because how do you explain what dark green means to somebody or feels? Because theoretically, it's also different for every person. So it's kind of a weird scenario where me, as somebody who wants to be a creator, and thank you to my professor who, made me realize that I do just want to be a creator. whether it's of video games or of writing, of art, I want to express what dark green means, even if it's to me and it doesn't get interpreted the right way. I want to be able to explain things that go on in my mind that are just philosophical or theoretical and can't be physically done to the best of my ability in a medium of some sort. And that's just, I guess that was my awakening, strangely enough, and I'm sure I've had some before, and I'll probably have some more later on. As you go on, you learn more things, you figure out more things, and including more about yourself. But I felt like I should at least make a video recognizing the honestly amazing thing that he did for me, even if for him he was just making sure I was okay. So, hope you have a good evening and stay undead.